Hi everyone, my name is Jamie and I work for Chegg Tutors. Today I want to talk to you about rhetoric, what we might call the art of persuasion in political speeches or historical analysis, what we might call showing off in some cases, or in literature, where how we analyze the craft, how an author writes, how an author persuades you, and especially how an author writes speeches or develops characters. There are three main divisions when we think about making an argument or trying to persuade someone, which is what rhetoric tries to do, whether in literature or in political speeches like this election season. You can have logos, the appeal to logic. This is where we use statistics, where we make what we think are logical arguments. We might bring in science. We might bring in a report by an expert agency like the CDC or the WHO on health issues or an international climate change organization. This is where we're really trying to seem like we're being objective, just bringing in facts and making an argument that way. There's ethos, which is the appeal to credibility. Note that this comes from the same root as the root for ethics, but it's not an appeal to morality. It's an appeal to how much of an expert the person is who's speaking. So, for example, when we have Donald Trump, we might take him as an expert on business, but maybe not on foreign policy, to use a more controversial example. To use a less controversial example, we treat sports, we often have Olympic announcers who were former Olympic athletes or sportscasters who used to be professional basketball players, say, and that's because the commentary that these people provide is treated as credible because it's by an expert who's really been through the experience. The last thing we want to think about, which is maybe the most common in literature, is the appeal to emotions. Here, we're not necessarily providing a detailed platform or argument. We're not saying we're experts, but we're saying, hey, I'm human, you're human, you should feel this way, and let me tell you why. Here's where we might have the more fancy flourishes where someone says, hey, I have a story for you. It's where we take a magazine versus the front page of the news, and the magazine has a detailed profile of someone that's really appealing to your emotions as a way of understanding this person's experience. Let's take a look at an example passage. This is from O Captain, My Captain by Walt Whitman. It's an elegy on the death of Abraham Lincoln. O Captain, my Captain, our fearful trip is done. The ship has weathered every rack. The prize we sought is won. The port is near, the bells I hear, the people all exulting, while fellow eyes the steady keel, the vessel grim and daring. But oh heart, 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 oh the bleeding drops of red, where on the deck my captain lies, fallen, cold, and dead. Take a second to think about what kind of strategies Walt Whitman is here using to express his grief and to persuade us that we should feel grief too. So we don't have to worry so much about what these things are called, although you may be asked it on, say, the AP exam or by a teacher or by, a language teacher if you're in a foreign language or, say, studying classics like Latin. But let's take a look first, before we do the definitions, at what's going on here. So there's a lot of repetition of the honorific of captain. Now, Walt Whitman doesn't mean this literally, but he didn't serve in the army, and he doesn't mean this as Abraham Lincoln is literally a captain. He may be a president, but he's using a metaphor of a ship and the captain leading the ship. A ship is going through a storm of the Civil War, and the captain, Abraham Lincoln, is leading the ship. So there's metaphor going on. There's grief. You can see it's a lament, and that's repeated as well. You can see the language that's used, the language of fighting. The prize we sought is won. We're almost home. The port is near. The people are exulting, but the captain lies on the deck dead. And this is pathos. There's a great scene where there's a homecoming. There's a hero's welcome on the way, but Whitman's captain is dead. The speaker's captain is dead. And that's how this first stanza ends in the poem, fallen, cold, and dead. So we see he uses word choice. He uses repetition like, oh, heart, heart, heart. He uses one part standing in for a whole. He doesn't say my captain's blood. He says the bleeding drops of red. And we really zoom in on those bleeding drops as a very concrete way of showing the very abstract idea of death. So we really see the choice of language, the choice of repetition, the choice of direct address, where Whitman is addressing the dead man directly and not addressing the audience. We're overhearing it, and we almost feel like we're part of an intimate conversation, and that enhances the pathos as well. Now, if we do want the definitions, let's think of some specific strategies that folks use. If you are interested in Latin or in the AP exam in English literature or language, you might find figures of speech and figures of thought differentiated. Figures of speech is this poetic devices you might know, word choice, hyperbole, meaning exaggeration, repetition, direct address, alliteration, where figures of thought is more the manipulation of concepts and ideas, using a metaphor, telling an anecdote, using dialogue, understating something to make a point, using descriptive language. Most people don't care about this distinction outside of classic scholars, but you may be called on an exam to figure it out. You also definitely want to know some of the names for these rhetorical devices, what we call them, just like poetic devices, but more broadly for rhetoric and speeches and persuasion. If you do want to really get into all of the kinds of devices, there's a website maintained by the University of Utah. Search the Forest of Rhetoric, and you'll find an incredible amount of information and examples on rhetoric and rhetorical devices, including its history, examples, resources. It's a really great site. Hope this has been helpful. That's all for now.